Welcome to Scandalous Forgotten Rituals. I'm Ellie, and tonight we're going back more than 300 years to a winter filled with hunger, fear, and superstition. A winter when one tiny ritual, made from rye, urine, and a dog, was performed in secret by people desperate for answers. A ritual that didn't stop the fear they felt, but helped feed it. This is the story of the witch cake. Imagine Salem Village in January of 1692. The days are short. The nights are bitterly cold. Snow piles against the doors of small wooden homes. Smoke rises slowly from chimneys, the only sign of warmth inside. Supplies are dwindling. Illness is common. And beneath it all, tension is already woven into the fabric of the community. There were arguments over land boundaries, disputes between neighbors, bitter disagreements about church leadership. Some families wanted to break away from the established church. Others were furious at the idea. Even before any mention of witchcraft, Salem was a village sitting quietly on top of a powder keg. Inside the home of Reverend Samuel Parris, something strange begins. Two young girls, Betty Parris, just 9 years old, and her cousin Abigail Williams, start behaving in ways no one could explain. Their bodies convulse. They scream without warning. They speak in strange fragments. They claim they feel pinched, pricked, and tormented by invisible forces. At times, they seem terrified by things no one else can see. In a world without mental health knowledge, without neurological science, without even the concept of psychological trauma, these behaviors felt terrifying. The community had no vocabulary for anything beyond the physical and the spiritual. If the doctor couldn't diagnose a wound or a disease, people assumed the cause must be something supernatural. And when the local physician examined the girls and found no physical explanation, he did something subtle, but powerful. He suggested that the cause might not be natural at all. He implied the possibility of witchcraft. That single hint, spoken in a deeply religious, deeply anxious community, was enough to shift the entire mood of the village. Fear that had been simmering now had a new shape. But before the trials, before the accusations and the courtrooms and the executions, there was a small moment of desperation, a moment that rarely makes it into textbooks or documentaries, a moment involving a quiet ritual meant to reveal the truth. Long before Salem became famous, people in New England carried with them old beliefs from Europe. Even in a strict Puritan society, folk magic lingered beneath the surface. People didn't talk about it openly, but they knew the rituals. They whispered them to each other, little charms to protect cattle, herbal mixtures to prevent illness, and in the most fearful situations, rituals meant to identify a source of harm. One of those rituals was the witch cake. The idea was strange even then. It wasn't designed to harm anyone, and it wasn't a spell in the way we think of spells today. It was a kind of supernatural test, a way, people believed, to identify whether a witch was afflicting someone. The recipe was unsettling. You took rye meal, one of the most common grains in the region, and mixed it with the urine of the afflicted person. You kneaded it into a small cake, and then you fed that cake to a dog. The belief was rooted in superstition, the idea that dogs could sense or react to witchcraft, that animals might serve as a bridge between the natural world and the unseen. If the dog reacted strangely, it would point to the witch responsible. In the Paris household lived an enslaved woman named Tituba. She was isolated, vulnerable, and in a position where refusing any request could be dangerous. Accounts from the time are conflicting. Some suggest she performed the ritual voluntarily, others that she was instructed. What is clear is that she became involved in the making of the witch cake. The ingredients were gathered quietly, the mixture was formed, the small cake was baked, and then, away from the eyes of the community, it was fed to a dog, not with malice, but with hope. Hope that someone, somehow, could find a way to stop the suffering of the girls. Nothing dramatic happened, no supernatural sign, no sudden revelation. Just a simple, strange act born out of fear and desperation. But the true turning point wasn't in the ritual itself. It was in the reaction. When Reverend Paris learned what had taken place under his roof, he was furious. Not because of witchcraft, but because the ritual itself was considered a sin. In Puritan belief, using any form of magic, even to combat supposed evil, was seen as opening the door to the devil. To him, the witch cake wasn't a cure. It was confirmation that dark forces were at work. And in a society already teetering on the edge, that fear needed a target. Blame fell swiftly on Tituba. She was accused of consorting with evil. The quiet ritual, intended to identify harm, now marked her as suspicious. Fear hardened into accusation, and once that accusation existed, others followed. It was as if the village had been waiting for a spark, and the witch cake provided it. Neighbors who had long-standing grudges suddenly saw those conflicts through a new lens. People who had argued over property now wondered if misfortune had been caused intentionally. Old resentments took on supernatural meaning. Fear spread faster than fact. Within weeks, Tituba was interrogated. Under enormous pressure, she confessed to things she likely did not believe, echoing images and ideas fed to her by her interrogators. And once she confessed, the panic exploded. The idea that witches were real and active in Salem seemed confirmed. Accusations multiplied, trials began, lives unraveled. And yet, as the story grew larger, filled with courtrooms, judges, and executions, the small origin point faded from memory. The witch cake was overshadowed by the enormity of what followed. It became a forgotten detail, even though it was one of the earliest sparks that helped transform private fear into public hysteria. It's strange to consider how history sometimes turns on tiny hinges. A handful of rye, a frightened household, a whispered belief, a ritual no one was supposed to perform. And yet that little cake helped set in motion a chain of events that would become one of the most tragic chapters in American history. When we think of Salem, we often imagine crowds, accusations, and the loud machinery of panic. But before the shouting, there was silence. Before the public terror, there was private fear. Before the trials, there was a kitchen, a crude cake, and a desperate attempt to find answers. A ritual meant to reveal the truth, that instead revealed the power of fear. So the next time you hear about the Salem Witch Trials, remember the witch cake, not because it was magic, but because it was human. A reminder that panic often begins with small things, whispers, rumors, acts taken in desperation, without any sense of what they might unleash. Thank you for spending this quiet moment in history with me. Until next time, stay curious and listen closely. Some rituals don't leave scars, they leave echoes.